I was transmigrated into a novel as the villainous supporting character, the one who bullied the female lead since we were kids. 3. I was supposed to snatch her bottle. 5. Kick her doll away. By 10, I was making her do my homework. When I got older, to save my own skin, I deliberately went to a different college to avoid her. But then, at the freshman welcome party, we met again. She gripped my wrist tightly, her voice on the verge of hysteria. "Ethan, why are you avoiding me?" I had just arrived in this world, and my head was still spinning. The original character's grandfather had bought him a cupcake, which he was thrilled about. He'd taken it to show off and taunt the female lead, Chloe. In response, she threw a rock at him, hitting him in the head and knocking the cupcake to the ground. That's how the feud started. The original Ethan made it his mission to torment her every time they met, dead set on getting revenge. This continued until she moved away. They met again in college, where he saw her shining and successful, fell for her, and began to obsessively pursue her, trying to break up her and the male lead, which ultimately led to his own tragic end. I gingerly touched the bump on my head. It wasn't too bad. The swelling was minor. That little wolf cub was glaring at me from a short distance away, looking like she was ready to pounce and snatch the cupcake at any second. But wait, the girl looked like she'd already been through the ringer. How was I the one bullying her? Whatever, she was only 6. My 22-year-old soul was old enough to be her dad, and even the original Ethan was 10. I wasn't going to argue with a little kid. I quietly picked up the cupcake. The frosting was a lost cause, but the golden cake base was still intact. I broke off the dirty parts and set the rest on top of the low stone wall. "Hey!" I called out, pointing to the cake before turning and heading back inside. She was filthy, and I didn't want to get too close. I ducked inside and watched her from the window. Chloe seemed completely caught off guard by this twist. Her fierce eyes showed a moment of stunned silence. Then she lunged like a starving animal, snatched the cupcake, and bolted. A few days later, Chloe started loitering around my house again. I quickly scraped our leftovers into a big bowl, set it on the wall without a word, and went back inside. I really didn't want to get involved. A part of me even wanted to be like the original Ethan and just chase her off with a rock or a stick. The way her cold eyes watched you, it felt like she was up to no good. My grandma even asked, "How come you haven't been teasing that girl lately?" I scratched the back of my head and spouted some righteous nonsense. "My teacher says we should help people. And besides, you and Grandpa said it yourselves, right? Her dad's a drunk who ignores her, and her mom took off. It's really sad." My grandma stroked my hair lovingly, telling me I was finally growing up, right? I just hoped she'd remember this small kindness and then forget I ever existed. A week went by peacefully. I was in my room doing homework when a loud crack outside the window made me jump. The bowl I'd left on the wall was now shattered in pieces about 6 feet away. I gripped my pen so hard I thought it would snap, imagining it was Chloe's neck. That little brat. This was the 4th bowl. The first one never came back. The second vanished without a trace. The third ended up smashed in the drainage ditch outside our house. And now the 4th had come home to roost, shattered in our own yard. And the little brat herself was long gone. I placed another bowl on the wall. Next to it, I put a single piece of candy in a clear green wrapper, the round hard candy visible inside. Then I found a long, thin bamboo switch, about 4 feet long, and hid behind a thick evergreen bush. I felt like a kid setting a trap for a sparrow in the snow, buzzing with excitement. The moment she showed up, I was going to deliver some swift justice. If I didn't teach her a lesson, she'd think our bowls grew on trees. After collecting a dozen mosquito bites, I finally saw Chloe approaching, limping badly. I frowned. She was running like the wind this morning. How did she end up lame in just a couple of hours? As she got closer, I could see that not even the grime caked on her face could hide the large, bruised lump on her forehead, which was still bleeding slightly. When she saw the candy, her small body froze. Her face went blank with shock. She stared at it for a long time before slowly, carefully reaching out, treating it like a priceless treasure. A lump formed in my throat. Was her childhood really this miserable? Had she never even had a piece of candy? Seeing her about to leave, I quickly stepped out from my hiding spot. Chloe jumped, stumbling back in terror, her dark eyes wide with panic. Her reaction startled me too. "Don't break my bowl," I said, dragging the bamboo switch as I walked past her. "Bring it back in one piece." "Got it." She just stood there, frozen. I thought for a second, then pulled the rest of the candy from my pocket and held it out to her. "Here." She stared at my hand for a long moment, then spun around and ran off. She limped and swayed, her bare feet pounding the gravel path as if she couldn't feel the pain. I was half expecting her to trip and fall with each wobble. Thankfully, she didn't. I looked down at my palm, where a few candies lay, their wrappers a vibrant, colorful mix. I closed my fist around them, deciding I'd give her another one next time. My grandpa got home before dinner and started talking about the gossip from the fields. Apparently, Chloe's dad had beaten her that morning because he woke up hungover and there was no hot water for him. I thought of her bleeding forehead, the way she limped, and the scars on her arm I'd seen when she reached for the candy. I lost my appetite during that meal. Sometimes I felt like I was feeding a stray dog. Like right now, I didn't see Chloe around, so I tapped a small aluminum pan with my chopsticks. Why an aluminum pan? To save the rest of our ceramic bowls, of course. It didn't take long for Chloe to appear at the sound. She watched me from a distance, her dark eyes shining brightly in her grimy face. They were wary and guarded, but held a flicker of hope. That look of hers really got to me. I quietly placed a milk toffee on top of the food, gave her a nod, and went back inside. The thought did cross my mind. Should I just swoop in while she's young? A kind of big brother romance? A nurturing type of thing? I mean, I was already acting like her guardian, right? But then I thought, no, I'm not a creep. My parents ran a small business in Denver, while I lived with my grandparents in a small town just outside the city. I'd be moving to Denver for middle school after I finished elementary here. Chloe, who was 3 years younger than me, had just started first grade this semester. Apparently, a teacher doing rounds for a truancy prevention program discovered an unenrolled school-aged child. They had to track down her drunk of a father and force him to register her. He hadn't wanted to send her to school because she was a girl. Over the week of the 4th of July break, I fed her every day. It was just leftovers, but it was warm and better than nothing. She'd progressed from smashing my bowls, to tossing the aluminum pan back into the yard, to now actually washing the pan and chopsticks and leaving them where she found them. I guess she was capable of gratitude after all. I took that thought back a second later. Grateful my ass. The little brat stole my pork bun. The lady at the food stand was handing it to me, and as I reached for it, Chloe darted in, snatched it right out of her hand, and disappeared in a flash. I looked at the vendor. The vendor looked at me. She clearly wasn't going to eat the cost. I sighed and pulled out another $1 to buy a plain steamed bun. The pork bun was $1, the plain one was 70 cents. My grandma had given me $2, leaving me with 30 cents. That $1 was supposed to be for a new pen. That little brat. The first day back at school, I was in the classroom collecting homework and trying to get morning reading started. The boys were being completely unruly, ignoring everything I said. The pent-up anger from my stolen breakfast finally had an outlet. I slammed my book down on the teacher's desk. The sound, filled with my fury, echoed through the room. The classroom fell instantly silent. Every kid stared at me in shock. I shot a cold glare at the boys who had been causing trouble. "Try me," I said. "You little punks are here to learn, not to wrestle. Get back to your seats now." Maybe it was the force of my adult personality, but the 10-year-olds, though they looked resentful, shuffled back to their desks without another peep. Listening to the drone of them reading aloud, looking out at all the innocent fourth-grade faces, the whole situation felt surreal. Me, a 22-year-old man, was now a fourth grader, and the class president, no less. I was killing it. During the morning exercise assembly, I discovered I was also the one leading the exercises. Seriously, thankfully, I had the original Ethan's memories, or I would have made a complete fool of myself. From my spot up on the stage, I had a clear view of everything. To the left, a first grader who looked like she'd been pulled from a dumpster was getting an earful from a teacher. She stood ramrod straight, staring at the ground, scuffing one foot against the other with a look of pure defiance that was instantly irritating. Lunch was the free meal provided by the school district. It was edible enough to keep you from starving, but you'd never call it delicious. Chloe, however, would wolf down 3 whole bowls. She shoveled food into her mouth like she was a starving ghost, stuffing her cheeks with each bite, chewing twice, and then swallowing whole. It was hard to watch. In my past life, every girl I knew had been raised with love and care. After school, I stayed behind to make sure the classroom was cleaned, then locked the door and left the key on the teacher's windowsill as usual. I had just reached the bottom of the stairs when a group of older boys ran past, carrying Chloe between them. I stood there for a moment, sighed, then turned around, went back upstairs, and knocked on the 6th grade teacher's door. Might as well be the hero. The teacher was frantic. I wasn't too worried. I knew from the plot she wouldn't die. By the time we found her, she'd been dumped in a muddy irrigation ditch by the side of the road. She was sitting in a corner of it, soaked through, looking tiny and utterly alone. My heart clenched. In the original story, Ethan had seen this happen too. He'd let it play out, even laughed at her, thrown mud and water on her, and tormented her before finally leaving. I walked to the edge of the ditch and held out my hand. "Come on." The little mud-caked figure didn't move. Her eyes were piercingly bright and cold. Where there should have been childish innocence, there was only a dark, vicious look that promised to drag everyone down with her. I thought for a second and offered her a piece of candy. Her eyes slowly shifted to the candy. Her dark pupils contracted, and for a second, a flicker of vulnerability showed through. "Come on," I said, holding it out a little further. After a long pause, she tried to stand. The thick mud clung to her, threatening to pull her small frame back down. She struggled with her hands and knees, getting up, falling, getting up again, until she finally made it to me. A hand completely caked in mud, with no skin showing, reached for the candy. I pulled the candy back, took her hand, and dipped it in the cleaner water at the edge of the ditch. Her hand was so small and thin, all sharp bones. A heavy feeling settled in my chest. "Let's get the mud off first." The teacher stood by, frowning as if this was the biggest inconvenience of her life. Finally, she said to me, "Why don't you take her home, son?" I replied flatly, "Teacher, you should probably be the one to handle this. Chloe's dad is the town drunk. He gets violent." In the end, the teacher called the parents of the 6th graders involved. They worked something out, got Chloe cleaned up, and dressed her in some hand-me-down clothes. After all this time, I finally got a good look at the story's female lead. She had a delicate face, big eyes, and fair skin. A little too thin, but she was definitely pretty, just as you'd expect from a protagonist. She trailed behind me wearing someone else's old backpack. It was so big on her that the bottom hung down to the backs of her knees. The books inside were probably hand-me-downs from one of the 6th graders too. Her old backpack, a grimy black thing with a broken strap tied in a knot and a busted zipper that gaped open, had met its end in that muddy ditch. It looked like something she'd fished out of the trash anyway. I turned to look at her. She stopped walking and stared back at me, her expression cold. "I didn't appreciate you stealing my breakfast this morning," I said. "If you ever do it again, I swear I'll hit you. You can test me on that." She shot me a venomous glare and then took off running. "Your candy!" I yelled after her. She skidded to a halt, spun around, ran back to snatch the candy from my hand, and then took off again. I couldn't help but mutter, "Little brat." When I got home, my grandma asked why that girl hadn't been coming around for her meals. I said I didn't know, maybe she was holding a grudge because I'd threatened her. Tapping the pan didn't bring her running anymore. The food I left on the wall sat there untouched, attracting flies. Or maybe, with the free school lunches, she was getting by just fine and didn't need my leftovers anymore. I decided I'd try for a couple more days, and if she didn't take the food, I'd stop. But I'd forgotten what kind of story this was. This was a story about redemption, which meant the female lead wasn't just suddenly unhinged. She'd been that way all along. She snapped a cat's neck, right in front of me. Motorcycles often sped down our town's main road, carrying passengers. A tiny kitten couldn't get out of the way in time and was run over. It was twitching on the pavement, blood coming from its mouth, unable to even cry out. It wasn't going to make it. Chloe was standing about 6 feet away from the kitten and saw the whole thing. I was a few yards behind her. She stood there for a long moment, then slowly walked over and picked the kitten up by the scruff of its neck. The kitten was still twitching, but its movements were faint. I thought she was going to move it to the side of the road, maybe pet it and comfort it in its last moments. I was wrong. She held its head in one hand and its body in the other, and with a sharp, brutal motion, she snapped its neck. A cold dread washed over me. The hair on my arms stood up, and my scalp prickled. I took an involuntary step back. She turned and looked at me, her expression utterly detached, as if she were something not quite human, part demon, part deity. She didn't move, and I was too scared to. The autumn breeze felt like it was freezing me solid. It wasn't until another motorcycle sped by and I heard the distant sound of other kids laughing that the spell was broken and I felt like I was back on Earth. She moved then, gently cradling the now-still kitten in her arms and walking down a small path that bordered a field. I hesitated for a second, then followed her. I was half afraid she was going to cook and eat it. She didn't eat it. She went to a small patch of woods, dug a hole with a broken branch, placed the kitten inside, and covered it with dirt and leaves. Watching her small back, I suddenly understood why she'd done it. A quick end was better than a slow, painful death. Ripping off the Band-Aid. But she was barely 7 years old. I couldn't imagine what kind of life she must have led to become so brutally pragmatic at her age. I took a small thermos out of my backpack. My grandma had bought it for me back in 3rd grade to bring me soup when I was sick. "Chloe, this is for you," I said. "From now on, after you finish your lunch at school, fill this up to take home for dinner. Just make sure you tell your teacher." She turned and stared at me, her eyes like a frozen pond in winter, cold and utterly devoid of life. When she didn't move, I said louder, "Come on, take it." She slowly stood up and walked over, stopping right in front of me without a word. I leaned over, unzipped her backpack, and put the thermos inside for her. She was starting to smell sour again. I wrinkled my nose. "You're a girl. You need to wash up and change your clothes more often." "I don't have any other clothes," she said. Her words caught in my throat. After a moment, I took her hand. It was black with dirt. I sighed internally. "You need to at least wash your face in the morning. Come on, you're coming with me." I took her back to my house, explained the situation to my grandparents, and we dug out some of my old clothes, stuffing them into a bag for her. I brought a washtub out to the yard and made her watch closely as I showed her how to do laundry. Soak the clothes in soapy water, count to 100, stomp on them a few times, scrub them by hand, wring them out, rinse 3 times with clean water, and then hang them up. "Did you get all that?" She nodded. My grandparents called us in for dinner and invited her to join, but she shook her head. I filled the aluminum pan with food for her instead. She finally took it, squatted by our doorway, and devoured it. People say it can take a lifetime to heal from a bad childhood. For Chloe, it felt like it would take several. Her family was on welfare, but her dad spent all the money on booze and gambling, leaving her to survive on her own. There was never any food in their house. Her dad made sure he ate, and that was it. When Chloe got hungry, she'd scavenge for food, and when she couldn't find any, she'd steal. If she got caught, they'd drag her to her father, who would beat her senseless without a second thought. Even though she was just a little girl, like right now, I was leaning against the wall at school, listening to the rhythmic thuds coming from down the hall. If you didn't know better, you'd think someone was beating the dust out of a rug. But it was a person being beaten, a small child, being brutally punched, slapped, and kicked by her own father. Every sickening thud landed like a blow to my own chest. Our school only had one set of restrooms, out by the playground. I was heading down to use them when I saw her get kicked so hard she flew from the classroom doorway into the wall of the open-air hallway. She crumpled there like a discarded doll, too weak to even fight back. I quickly ducked back behind the corner, not wanting her to see me. A teacher was trying to reason with the drunk. "You can't hit a child like that." Her father slurred back. "She's a thief. You beat them until they're too scared to steal anymore." What had she stolen? Someone's clothes hangers and laundry detergent. I had taught her to do laundry and she'd listened, but she didn't have any soap or hangers at home. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. The pain helped me stay calm. I couldn't just run out there and beat the crap out of that monster. So I waited. When he finally left and headed for the stairs, I saw my chance. I charged forward and slammed right into his back. The reek of stale booze and body odor almost made me gag. He went down and I went down with him. I scrambled to my feet, keeping my head down. "Oh, Mr. Miller? I'm so sorry, sir. I wasn't looking where I was going. It was an accident. I was in a rush to get to the restroom and I didn't see you. I'm really sorry." He shot me a dirty look. "Just get going." "Yes, sir, thank you, sir," I said, and then took off toward the restrooms. When I got home from school, I went through our closets and gathered up all the bent and broken hangers. I poured half a box of laundry detergent into an old water bottle and set both items on the wall. I tapped the aluminum pan. A moment later, Chloe's head peeked out from behind the neighbor's fence. I pointed to the stuff. "Take it home." She slowly walked over. Her hair looked like it had been washed. It was a dull, straw-like color from malnutrition, but it was clean. She'd changed into one of my old shirts and didn't smell anymore, though there were still some dirty patches on her skin. I pointed to the back of her ears and her neck. "When you wash up, you have to scrub these parts too." She gave a small nod. I handed her another piece of candy and asked quietly, "Does it still hurt?" Her hand froze for a second as she took the candy. She shook her head. Clutching the candy tightly, she stood perfectly straight with her eyes on the ground. It wasn't defiance I was seeing. It was the stubborn will to survive. I reached out and ruffled her hair, my voice softening despite myself. "It's going to be okay. I promise things will get better. Your real mom will come for you. You'll have a great stepdad and a stepbrother who looks out for you. And you'll even fall in love with him." Chloe just watched me, her expression unreadable. Every school morning, no matter how early I woke up, my grandma was already up. She'd have breakfast ready and tell me to eat so I could get some reading done before I had to leave. As I was shouldering my backpack, my grandma handed me a plastic bag. Inside were 2 sweet potatoes that she'd baked in the embers of the stove the night before. "For that little girl," she said. I called Chloe over and told her to say thank you. She just stood there silently. My grandma gently patted her head. "Oh, don't you worry about that. It's just a couple of sweet potatoes. You eat up now so you can focus at school." I didn't expect much from her, so I just tugged on her sleeve to get her moving. "Thank you," she whispered, the sound barely audible. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. I patted her on the head. "Good job. Let's go." When we got to school, I went up to the second floor and she went to her classroom on the first. During the morning assembly, I saw her standing outside her classroom door again. Her teacher was impatiently demanding to know why she hadn't done her homework. Chloe just stood there in silence like a statue. "If you don't turn it in, I'm calling your father." It was a heavy threat, but Chloe didn't even flinch. I didn't plan on getting involved. It wasn't like I had some game-like system forcing me to. Maybe I wasn't a saint after all. My first thought was that she needed to learn how to fend for herself. So after school, when I saw my grandma planting cabbages in the garden, I tapped the pan to call Chloe over and told her to watch and learn. For once, the little girl looked completely lost. "Learn," I told her. "Learn how to do this so you can grow your own food and stop stealing." She watched intently until my grandma was finished. I gave her a bowl of food and pressed a small packet of cabbage seeds into her hand. "Go plant these. If you don't know how, come ask me." As she walked away, I couldn't stop myself from yelling, "And do your homework." Chloe and I fell into a routine. She'd come to my house for a bite of breakfast in the morning, then trail behind me on the way to school. In the afternoon, she'd wait for me and follow me home. Some of my classmates teased me about my little shadow, but I ignored them. Other kids would call her a leech, but she never reacted. But one day, when a boy threw a mud clod at her, she flew at him like a wild animal, tackling the kid who was a head taller than her and tearing into him. It took all my strength to pull her off him, and I gave her a stern lecture. But she just looked at me and said, "Your clothes." I couldn't let them get your clothes dirty. I sighed, brushing the dirt from her shirt. "You can always wash clothes, but if you get hurt, that's different. That hurts." To keep the older kids from bothering her, I started having her do her homework outside the first grade teacher's office until I was done with my classes. Then I'd walk her home. It was harvest season, so I was spending my afternoons helping my grandparents dig up sweet potatoes. They would dig them up, and my job was to shake off the dirt and break off the stems. I saw Chloe standing in the distance, watching us with a numb, cold expression. Suddenly, I had an idea. "Grandma, I'll be right back." I found a small burlap sack and gave it to Chloe, telling her to bring it over to me in a little bit. She started to follow me right away, so I gently pushed her back. "Stay right here," I said, holding her by the shoulders. "Count to 100, then come over and bring the sack with you." "Got it." My grandparents asked where I'd gone. I told them I saw Chloe and asked her to grab a sack so she could help us sort the potatoes in exchange for a few to take home. When Chloe finally came over, the tiny girl was holding the empty sack in front of her with both hands, so formally that it covered half her body. A lump formed in my throat. She must have thought I'd given her some monumentally important task, judging by how seriously she was holding it. I called out extra loud, "Chloe, you made it. Come give us a hand. When we're done, you can pick out a few to take home." My grandparents exchanged a look and joined in. "That's right, little lady, get to work. Grandpa will help you carry them home later." She looked completely bewildered. This was probably the first time anyone had offered her kindness that wasn't a condescending handout or a way to get rid of her. She just stared at me, so I yelled, "Come on, it'll be dark soon." She worked incredibly hard, moving quickly and carefully. Seeing her tiny figure squatting there in the dirt was a little heartbreaking. Some time passed. Her cabbages sprouted, creating a patch of vibrant green. Chloe, copying the other gardeners, had collected sticks to build a small fence around her plot to keep the neighbors' chickens out. A few days ago, she'd been watching old Mr. Peterson plant cauliflower, and he'd given her a few seedlings. Now, my grandma sent me over with some radish and cabbage starts for her. "Your cabbages look great," I said, circling her little garden, genuinely impressed. The protagonist's touch, I guess. A regular green thumb. "I'll pick some for you," she said, about to step into the patch. I stopped her. "No, it's okay." I handed her the seedlings. "My grandma sent these over. You should get them in the ground soon." "You?" She hesitated, looking like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I crouched down to her level. "What is it? How many of those sweet potatoes did you guys get?" she asked. 3 huge sacks. "In a few days, my grandpa is going to bring you 10 pounds of rice. After that, other people will probably start doing the same, so you should clean up your house and make some space for it." She nodded slightly, then suddenly turned and ran toward her house, calling back over her shoulder, "I'll get you a drink of water." A 7-year-old, already acting like a miniature adult. I didn't know whether to be proud or heartbroken. A heavy weight settled in my chest. She carried the ceramic bowl carefully. It was spotless, and the water inside was clear. "I washed it," she said, wringing her hands. "The water cistern and the bowl. I washed them." I realized she was explaining because I hadn't taken a drink yet, worried I thought it was dirty. I gave her fluffy hair an encouraging ruffle. "You're doing a great job. I took a sip of water and handed the bowl back. It's getting cold out. Remember to boil your water before you drink it so you don't get sick. She nodded. Just then, a sloppy, menacing man appeared in her doorway. Before I could even react, Chloe spun around and stood in front of me, spreading her small arms out as if to shield me. The sight struck me to the core. So small, so terrified, and yet so brave. "Mr. Miller," I called out. "My grandma just sent me over with these seedlings. I was just leaving." I gave Chloe's shoulder a light pat. "You be careful. Don't set him off." Then I walked away. But the next day, I got called into the first grade teacher's office. She told me Chloe had gotten into another fight and that I needed to do something about it. I was stunned. "Ma'am, I'm not her guardian. I have no obligation to stand here and get a lecture from you." The teacher was taken aback. "But you've been trying to help her. You want her to improve. That's your job as a teacher, not mine," I said. "We're not related. I'm just a kid from her neighborhood who knows her." When I walked out of the office, Chloe was waiting by the door like a kicked puppy, looking both hurt and furious. Her little fists clenched as she glared at me. I smacked the top of her head lightly. "I help you because I choose to, but I'm not your parent. Some things are not my problem." I turned to leave. How dare she be angry? I was the one who'd just gotten chewed out for no reason, being told I wasn't being a good big brother to her. The injustice of it made me so mad that I walked back and gave her a swat on the back. "Why are you fighting? And why'd you have to slam the kid into a wall? You're too violent. What if the teacher calls your dad? He'll kill you. Now go apologize to that boy, or don't ever talk to me again." Chloe shot me a quick look, then launched herself into the office like a cannonball. She dropped to her knees in front of the other boy with a loud thud. "I'm sorry," she yelled. I was speechless. The teacher was speechless. The little boy she'd been fighting, who had been sobbing his eyes out, was so shocked he just stared at her, his mouth hanging open, forgetting to cry. My eyes started to sting. Did this kid really think that's how you apologize? By kneeling? On the way home, I gave her a long talk about apologies. I explained that it's about understanding what you did wrong and meaning it when you say you're sorry, and that you have to try not to make the same mistake again, otherwise the words are empty, and that you should never, ever kneel unless it's for something incredibly important. I was going on, and I noticed her eyes were sparkling. They were curved into little crescent moons, and her face was lit up with pure happiness. Strange. I'd never seen anyone so happy to be getting a lecture. During finals review, I happened to see one of her language arts tests. She'd scored an 18. I was absolutely floored. The female lead in the novel was supposed to be a genius. An 18 in language arts? The book didn't go into much detail about her childhood. Most of it came up in flashbacks when the villainous supporting character was harassing her in college. So there was no way to know if she'd actually gotten an 18 in first grade in the original story. I looked up from the crumpled test paper to Chloe, who had her back to me but was clearly sneaking glances at me out of the corner of her eye. "Where's your math test?" I asked. She hesitated, then slowly, reluctantly, pulled another wrinkled paper from her bag. It was just as wrinkled, but the red ink stood out. 83. Okay, thank God. She wasn't hopeless, just struggling in one subject. With only 2 weeks until finals, there wasn't much I could do to help her catch up. I showed her how to organize her schoolwork and told her to spend the weekend at my house, redoing all her old tests in a notebook. I'd help her with the ones she got wrong. I thought I'd be patching a few holes, but it was more like trying to fill the ocean with pebbles. She didn't understand this, couldn't do that. I finally understood the suffering of teachers. Finals were a lost cause. We'd have to work on it over winter break. After her last exam, I had her bring over her textbooks and I started teaching her everything again, right from page 1. My grandparents would chuckle and say, "Look at our little Ethan, playing teacher. He's so smart." Smart or not, this particular student was a real challenge. When our report cards came, I got a 98 in language arts, a 100 in math, and a 99 in English. Chloe got a 45 in language arts and an 85 in math. I gritted my teeth and resigned myself to another round of tutoring. I don't know what clicked, but this time she learned incredibly fast. Besides a few concepts in language arts that she just couldn't grasp, she picked up everything else almost instantly. My parents came to pick me up for a visit to Denver, and they brought the workbooks and study guides I'd asked for. I left Chloe with a mountain of assignments, enough to keep her busy for the entire winter break. As I was leaving, she just stared at me, her big eyes filled with a sad reluctance, patted her head. "I'll be back before you know it. I'll bring you candy and a toy. I'll probably be back right around the time you finish all those workbooks." I could have stayed, but in the story, Ethan always spent part of his school breaks with his parents, so I had to keep up appearances. When I came back for New Year's, I brought Chloe 2 boxes of Poppets, a couple of spinning tops, and a new pair of shoes. I bought these with my own allowance and my reward money, I made sure to tell her. I was hoping she'd remember all this kindness so that when we met again as adults, she'd greet me with a smile instead of, trying to murder me. She just stood there holding the shoebox, not saying anything. I leaned down to get a better look at her face. Her eyes were rimmed with red, tears glistening on her lashes, and the tip of her nose was pink. Seeing her like that made my own throat feel tight. I reached out and gently ruffled her hair. It was clean now, shiny and soft, and had gotten much longer. "Happy New Year, Chloe." She pressed her lips together, and it was a long moment before she looked up at me. A single, perfect tear escaped her red-rimmed eye and traced a path down her cheek. "Thank you, Ethan. Happy New Year. If you could describe a mood with colors, mine would be a canvas splattered with every paint imaginable." I was bitter and angry about her suffering, sad and sympathetic about her tears, proud that she was learning to care for herself, and happy just to hear her call my name. Chloe's dad managed to stay sober for New Year's Day. He cooked a meal, put up decorations, and even lit some firecrackers before getting drunk again. I took Chloe and my cousin, and we joined a big group of kids from the neighborhood, going door to door to wish everyone a Happy New Year. By the time we were done, our pockets were stuffed with candy and a little bit of New Year's money. I emptied all of my money and treats into Chloe's pockets. "Here," I said, "go have yourself a good holiday." She looked at me, her eyes welling up again. "Ethan," I gave her a gentle push. "Go on, it's late. And remember to wear your new clothes and shoes tomorrow. It's a fresh start." She walked away, looking back over her shoulder every few steps. The next day, she wasn't wearing the new shoes. She said she didn't want to ruin them. The whole semester went by, and I saw her cycle through various pairs of worn-out, broken shoes, but never the new ones I gave her. She got perfect scores on her report card that semester, which made me incredibly proud. All that time I spent quizzing her on the walk to and from school and tutoring her on weekends had paid off. She'd shot up in height, too, and in second grade, she was even elected class president. By now, Chloe had transformed into the very picture of a self-reliant scholarship kid. Her clothes and shoes were old, but always clean. She wore her hair in a high ponytail, held her back straight, and looked ahead with a neutral expression. She carried herself with a quiet dignity, the kind you see in hardworking kids from tough backgrounds. She looked like she could be in one of those after-school specials. She was growing her own food, doing odd jobs for neighbors to earn a little money, and still managing to keep her grades up. The neighbors were kind and would hire her for small chores, paying her with rice, flour, or vegetables. It was a way to help her out while letting her keep her dignity. She was managing to get by. All she had to do was stay away from her father. As she got older, she got faster. She was able to avoid him most of the time, and on the rare occasions he caught her, she was usually able to get away and run to my house, where I'd patch her up. At the end of the school year, she came to me beaming, holding an award certificate. I was so happy for her I picked her up and spun her around in circles. That wasn't just her award. That was a testament to my teaching, failing all year and then acing the finals. I asked her why her regular test scores were so bad. She said she couldn't understand the teacher, but she could understand when I explained it. Fine, I guess I had a knack for teaching. In third grade, Chloe's teacher stopped me one day. She told me Chloe had written an essay for class called "My Big Brother." She said she knew right away it was about me, and that it was so moving it made her cry. She was going to read it aloud to the class as an example, but Chloe ran up to the front and begged her not to, so she relented. The teacher then went on and on about how kind and helpful I was, and how I was destined for great things. She said she'd learned a valuable lesson from me, that helping someone isn't just about pulling them out of the ditch, but also about teaching them how to clean themselves off and stay out of the ditch in the future. After that, my own teachers started praising me, then teachers from other grades, and even the principal. Because of that essay, in 6th grade I was given a City Good Citizen Award. The citation mentioned my work helping a younger student overcome the trauma of domestic abuse, helping her find support in the community, and inspiring her to love learning and achieve academic excellence. I never imagined my actions would be seen as something so noble. I just figured I had to keep her going until her biological mother showed up, and then everything would be fine. But then the unthinkable happened. I never realized just how insane her father was. In the dead of night, the silence was broken by the horrifying sound of someone being beaten. I heard a neighbor, Mrs. Davis, screaming, "Clark Miller, you goddamn bastard. You keep hitting her like that and you're going to kill your own daughter." By the time people threw on their coats and ran over, Chloe was hanging from a ceiling beam by her wrists, her head slumped on her chest, completely unconscious. They say even the most vicious animals don't harm their own young. What kind of monster was Clark Miller? It was freezing cold outside, and she was just a little girl, only 10 years old. To be hung up and beaten like that by her own father. How hopeless must she have felt? When she finally passed out, did she think it was a release? Damn it! A few of the neighborhood men carefully cut her down. I rushed forward and wrapped her in the oversized robe I'd thrown on. Her body was ice cold, and her pale skin was a mess of fresh bruises and old scars. I knew she wouldn't die, but my heart still twisted in agony. It was 2 days before Christmas. Other kids were getting spoiled, forgiven for any mischief with a "because it's Christmas." But Chloe was at home, being beaten to a pulp by her own father during the holidays. Chloe was taken to the hospital. She had 2 broken ribs and some minor internal bleeding. That Clark Miller was a monster. It was unbelievable. At the hospital, there was no one to look after her. It was strange. The Millers didn't seem to have any relatives in town, probably part of her tragic backstory in the novel. My grandpa said a few families from the neighborhood pooled some money, and a woman from town who was already staying in the city to help with her new grandchild agreed to bring Chloe meals. I went to visit her on Christmas Eve. She was sitting stiffly on the edge of the hospital bed, looking like a hollow, soulless doll. A sharp pain went through my chest. I walked closer. "Chloe." She looked up, and her eyes were as cold and hard as I'd ever seen them. I gently put my arms around her. "It's okay," I whispered. "It's over now. You're going to be okay." She had to stay in the hospital through Christmas, so I bought her a new outfit, new shoes, some snacks, and put some money in a card for her. As I was leaving, she just stared ahead with a blank face and said, "Thank you." Not long after that, her mother finally came and took her away. It was for the best. She was getting away from her monster of a father and starting a new life. "Chloe, I hope you're happy, wherever you are." 10 years later, it was the start of a new semester at the University of Colorado Boulder. Same old convocation ceremony, same old blazing sun. The freshmen sat ramrod straight, their faces flushed and sweaty but beaming with excitement. The upperclassmen, on the other hand, looked like wilted lettuce, half dead and radiating pure annoyance. My roommates and I were busy cursing the sun, the heat, the dean who scheduled this thing for 9 a.m., and the announcer who had just forbidden umbrellas. "Hello, everyone. I'm your freshman class representative, Chloe Miller." The voice was cool and clear, and it hit me like a splash of cold water. I froze. Chloe Miller? Couldn't be. I snapped my head toward the stage. The girl speaking was practically glowing in the sunlight. But Chloe was supposed to be at Georgetown with the male lead. This was CU Boulder, and I was a junior in college. Shouldn't she still be a senior in high school? Was it just someone with the same name? No, it was her. I recognized her instantly. Pictures and videos of her had already been making the rounds in my dorm, along with all the campus gossip. The little girl had grown into a stunning young woman. She moved with a gentle, easy grace. But her eyes still had that same coldness, a quiet, reserved chill. It was like all the darkness and ferocity from her childhood was hidden just beneath that calm surface, ready to peek through at any moment. Guys on campus were already obsessed with her. The school forums and message boards were flooded with her pictures, videos, and even fan fiction. Listening to my roommates talk, I realized that Chloe had reclaimed her role as the protagonist. She was the center of everyone's universe. She was like the moon in the night sky, cold, beautiful, and completely out of reach. And apparently, she didn't recognize me. I ran into her in the dining hall. She was walking right toward me. As I was trying to decide if I should say hi, she walked straight past me without a flicker of recognition. A wave of relief washed over me, and all my anxiety vanished. So what if I'd given her some leftovers and tutored her for a bit? It was a long time ago. Why would she remember? I was clearly making a big deal out of nothing. So at the freshman welcome party, when I finished my hosting duties and came off stage, she was heading on to perform. I walked right past her, keeping my eyes forward, just as she had done to me. Her piano and vocal performance was flawless, and it made her an instant campus celebrity. I figured that would be the end of it, just 2 strangers passing in the hall. But then my RA organized a mixer with a girls' dorm. We all got dressed up, thinking we looked pretty sharp, and headed to the restaurant. And there she was, sitting at the table, looking elegant and reserved. I stopped dead. "Chloe, what's up?" my roommate Kevin asked. Stunned by her beauty? I shook my head. "She's the campus queen," he said. "Took me calling in a few favors to get her and her friends to agree to this." I didn't say anything. As we walked in, the other girls looked up, their eyes widening in appreciation. Chloe gave us a quick, indifferent glance and then looked back down. There was no surprise, no recognition, nothing. In her eyes, I was just another stranger. Fine by me. We wouldn't have to get involved. Kevin, ever the bold one, walked right up to their table. "Hey, I'm Kevin. This is Ryan, and that's Ethan." I ended up across from a girl with long, straight dark hair and a shy smile. My other roommates found their spots too. All the girls were pretty, each in their own way, but Chloe was on another level. I snuck a glance at Chloe, expecting some kind of reaction when she heard my name. Nothing. She was as cool and composed as ever. I let it go and turned my attention to the girl across from me. She noticed me looking and gave me that shy smile again. I smiled back warmly. Suddenly, there was a loud clatter. Chloe's glass had tipped over, and water was spreading across the table. Everyone nearby scrambled for napkins. Kevin was already asking if she'd gotten any on herself. Chloe just shook her head, and as she did, her eyes met mine for a brief second. I gave her a slight nod and then looked away. Once the small crisis was averted, the girls introduced themselves. "Hi, it's nice to meet you all. This is Chloe, I'm Sarah, and this is Bella." We all shook hands and sat down. A moment later, my phone buzzed. It was a group iMessage from Ryan to Kevin. "Dude, trade with me. You don't have a shot with the queen. Let me take over." Leo chimed in. "No way, I'm next in line." My roommates started arguing. I just locked my phone. I went to the restroom, and when I came back, Chloe was sitting in the seat across from me. I looked at her, then at my roommates. What the hell? Had those vultures really just blatantly rearranged the seating chart? I looked at Chloe. She was focused on her food, her bangs hiding her eyes. Her long, thick eyelashes fluttered like a butterfly's wings. She suddenly gave off this air of being a sweet, well-behaved, innocent little kid. Wasn't that a little weird? A minute ago, she was the untouchable ice queen. Now she looked so meek and harmless. That little brat. Had she spent the last 10 years mastering the art of a personality switch? I had a bad feeling she was up to something. I didn't say a word. I just kept my head down and ate. My phone buzzed again. It was Leo. "Dude, she's looked at you like 5 times. She looks like she's about to cry. At least look up and say something to her. You heartless bastard." I looked up. Chloe immediately ducked her head lower, so all I could see was the bridge of her nose and its slightly pink tip, as if she'd been crying. I caught a glimpse of the corner of her eye, and it was red. She looked like a heartbroken, abandoned puppy. I was completely thrown. This wasn't the Chloe I remembered. The kid I knew was fierce and cold. Even when she was hurt, she was defiant and stubborn. Had the male lead in the story taught her this new act? This whole innocent, damsel in distress routine? I was the villainous supporting character. I had to remember my role. I pressed my lips together and went back to my food. I was a heartless jerk. Stay away from the female lead, ensure a bright future. So, the second dinner was over. I waved and said, "See ya, Ethan." Chloe took a small step forward, a look of cautious hope in her eyes. Despite her careful demeanor, her intention was obvious. She wanted to get closer to me, but I had no idea what her angle was. Was this about our past, or was it just a freshman with a crush? I decided to shut it down. "Sorry, I've got to go finish a paper. Bye." In the end, the whole movie plan fell apart. On the way back to the dorm, Kevin asked if I wasn't interested in her at all. I didn't even turn my head, just shot him a sideways glance. "You think I'm as desperate as you?" Right, you're Mr. Noble," he shot back. "You're so great, everyone's favorite big brother. If they can't be your girlfriend, they'll settle for being your little sister. You have no idea what it's like for the rest of us starving guys." I was about to fire back a retort when a contact request popped up on my phone. Chloe Miller. Her profile picture was a landscape that looked like an ink wash painting, with dark mountains against a pale sky. The view looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. Her username was just Chloe. I hesitated. Just then, Kevin grabbed my wrist, and Ryan leaned over and hit accept. "I will not let you pass up this opportunity, you coward," Kevin declared. "Me neither," Ryan added. "Thanks a lot, guys," I said sarcastically. "Don't mention it," they replied in unison. A week later, my roommates asked for a progress report. "There is no progress," I said. "We haven't talked. I'm not a predator." Well, we had talked a little. She'd messaged me. "What are you up to, Ethan?" I replied, "I'm going to sleep. D&D. Then she tried, "Ethan, can I buy you a coffee?" I shut her down. "On a diet. D&D. She tried again. "Do you hate me, Ethan?" My reply, "In class. D&D. Her. "Do you play video games?" Ethan, "Me, a homework. D&D. Then one day, Kevin blew up the group chat. "You absolute jerk. Chloe is in her dorm room about to cry because of you. Can't you just text her back like a decent human being?" I was confused. "How do you know she's about to cry?" He dropped a photo in the chat. It was Chloe, slumped against her bed frame, holding her phone in both hands. Her head was down, her brow furrowed, and her eyes were red and shimmering with unshed tears. With her pouting lips and pink nose, she looked like the saddest, most wronged person in the world. The photo stopped me cold. This is what she looked like every time I shut her down? Was this Chloe possessed by someone else? Or was this just who she was now? Had I remembered the novel wrong? Or was I in the wrong novel entirely? I was still staring at the picture when Ryan's message came through. Jerk! How can you be so heartless? Leo followed up. Jerk! Call her right now and tell her you love her, Kevin explained. Her roommate Sarah says that every time Chloe works up the nerve to text you, she waits, all hopeful and anxious. And then, when you reply, she just deflates. She goes from excited to sad to looking like she's about to burst into tears. She's so sweet, man. How can you do that to her? My head was spinning from the onslaught of accusations. Finally, under their relentless pressure, I gritted my teeth and replied to the message Chloe had sent asking to go for a walk. Binge watching a show. D&D. I was nothing if not consistent. A man with a heart of stone. This new, confusing version of Chloe was someone I couldn't afford to get mixed up with. I always had the feeling she was one wrong move away from snapping, and I wanted to be far away when that happened. Kevin and the guys planned another barbecue. I didn't realize until I got there that he'd invited Chloe and her friends too. Chloe was sitting shyly in her chair, but the moment she saw me, she shot to her feet, looking flustered. Ethan, she said my name, then pressed her lips together and stared at the ground. Kevin kept nudging me forward. I was at a loss for words. This was the female lead who was supposed to torture me and get me thrown in jail. Sure, I hadn't bullied her as a kid, I'd even helped her, but who knew if she was the type to hold a grudge or remember a kindness? No one understood my predicament. I knew I shouldn't fall for this act, but I couldn't help it. My heart softened. I sat down next to her. Her eyes instantly lit up with a surprised delight. Then, the rims of her eyes started to turn red as tears welled up, and she just looked at me, her eyes shimmering. Felt like a punch to the gut. What had I done to deserve this? Ethan, she whispered. A shiver went down my spine. That soft, pleading voice was a direct hit to my defenses. I'll listen to you, Ethan. Just please, don't ignore me. She looked at me with those wide, innocent eyes, her voice a quiet plea. It's only natural to feel bad for her, right? It was a normal day. Class had just ended, when Chloe suddenly appeared at the classroom door. She looked at me, sitting in the second row with a hopeful, timid expression. Ethan Hayes, she called out. After saying my name, she kept her eyes on me, glancing down and then back up, looking so nervous and sweet it made my heart ache. The noisy, crowded classroom seemed to go still as everyone turned to stare at her. I walked over to her, feeling the envious eyes of every guy in the room on my back. Her eyes visibly lit up, becoming as bright and clear as her name suggested. Okay, I'll admit it was cute, but I was still in control. I took her by the sleeve and led her into an empty classroom next door. What's up? Did you need something? She kept her head down, scuffing her shoe on the floor. Ethan, she said quietly, it's my birthday today. She looked up then, her eyes shining with hope. Could you celebrate it with me? And there it was again. My heart softened. This was becoming a chronic condition. It needed to be treated. I immediately pulled out my phone and Venmo'd her $200. Go buy yourself a cake. I've got another class. Be good. I hardened my heart and went back to my seat. The second I sat down, Ryan jabbed me hard in the ribs. You are such a stud, Kevin said, grabbing my face and forcing me to look at the doorway. Look at that, Mr. Popular. You made the poor freshman cry. Her eyes are all red. What did you do? Leo swept my books into my backpack, slung it around my neck, and hauled me out of my seat, pushing me toward the door. Go, you monster. Go comfort her. And just like that, I was standing awkwardly in front of Chloe again. I took a deep breath to calm my irritation, ran a hand through my hair, and adjusted my bag. Let's go, I sighed. It's okay if you don't want to, she said quietly. I'm used to being alone on my birthday. They literally threw me out. You think they're going to let me back in? I said, starting to walk. Come on. What do you want to do for your birthday? Did I make you mad? She asked. No. Ethan, can I hold your hand? Isn't that what girlfriends are supposed to do with their boyfriends? I froze. Boyfriend? What boyfriend? Had she lost her mind? Or maybe she'd suffered some kind of head injury in the last 10 years. She actually reached for my hand. I instinctively took a step back. Whoa there, kiddo. We're just friends, okay? She tilted her head, her expression one of pure innocence. But you're a boy, aren't you? So you're a boyfriend. I was speechless. That was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. I managed to force an awkward laugh. The rest of the day was a blur of carousels, cotton candy, spinning rides, ice cream, and a Ferris wheel. My 20-something soul in a college kid's body felt ancient. We got out of the cab in front of a 4-star hotel. My brain short-circuited. Worried I was the one with the dirty mind, I stammered, kiddo, what's this about? Chloe turned to me, her eyes downcast. Well, I read online that once you're 18 you can… She bit her lip, shooting me a shy, blushing glance. Goodbye, I yelled, spinning around and diving back into the cab. Driver, step on it. The driver slammed on the gas, and the car peeled out. My life depended on this escape. I sent Chloe a very serious iMessage. You're still young. You should be focused on your studies, not rushing to find a boyfriend. I'm just an upperclassman to you, that's all. If you can't understand that, then we shouldn't talk anymore. The second I hit send, a FaceTime call from her popped up, as if she'd been staring at her phone waiting for my text. I fumbled to decline the call and immediately shut off my phone. That simple action left me feeling like I'd just run a marathon. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I was gasping for air. That was terrifying. I slept soundly, dreaming I was back on that spinning ride, saving some girl who was about to fly off. In the dream, Chloe wrapped her arms around my neck, her smile chillingly cold. Ethan, she whispered, you can't run away. I shot up in bed, gasping for air. That scared the hell out of me. After I calmed down, I looked over and saw Ryan staring at me with an accusatory expression. I was confused. What did you say to Chloe last night? He demanded. You had her crying in her bed all night. Crying? Chloe was actually crying? Who's crying? What did our resident heartbreaker do now? Leo chimed in, leaning over from his bunk. Kevin, sitting on his bed across from me, just shook his head. Ethan, you're a real lady killer. I sighed and turned my phone back on. There were several messages from Chloe. Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I know you don't like me, and I keep pushing. I know it's annoying, but I really do like you, Ethan. Please don't ignore me. Are you really not going to talk to me anymore? I could practically see her, sniffling and crying as she typed those messages. I was a monster. I texted her back. No, I just fell asleep. The second I sent it, I smacked my hand. Why was I so weak? Leo whispered conspiratorially. You can still unsend it. I nodded. Right? But it was too late. I must have been temporarily possessed. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Ethan, I brought you breakfast. My sleepy brain snapped to full alert. I stared at the text, lost in thought. So this was her understanding our relationship? This was her acting like a normal underclassman? I looked over at Kevin. I'm skipping my morning class. Can you cover for me if they take attendance? Kevin turned around with a challenging grin. Nice try. If you don't go down, we're carrying you. Ryan and Leo both gave him a silent okay sign. Defeated, I rushed downstairs. She was waiting under a large oak tree, looking radiant in a white dress. Ethan, Chloe beamed, walking quickly toward me. Her smile was so bright and sunny, it looked like she was the happiest person on earth. After that, it wasn't just breakfast. She started sitting in on my classes when she was free, saving me seats in the library, and sometimes having coffee or food delivered to me. My roommates couldn't stop talking about how thoughtful she was. I didn't know what to say. She invited me for walks around the track, to club performances, to movies, to watch the freshman sports games. She was completely ignoring the just friends boundary I'd set. Whenever I brought it up, she'd give me this wide-eyed, innocent look and say pitifully, Ethan, did I do something wrong? Can't an underclassman ask an upperclassman to a movie? Or just for a walk? It's not like we held hands or anything. The innocent freshman was just being friendly. It was the demanding upperclassman who was making things weird, right? For the university's fall festival, she was in a group dance. One night, practice ran late, and she asked if I could walk her back to her dorm. Thinking it probably wasn't safe for her to walk alone, I agreed. When I got to the dance studio, Chloe was standing in the doorway in a black leotard and skirt, staring at a painting on the opposite wall. The hallway was dimly lit, the walls covered with student artwork. For a second, the pitch-black dance studio behind her looked like a giant monster, its mouth open, ready to swallow her whole. But at the same time, she looked like she was the monster's master, waiting patiently for her prey to walk into the trap. It was a strange, contradictory image. As if sensing my presence, she turned and her eyes locked onto mine. For a split second, her gaze was sharp, piercing, and cold. My heart stuttered. Then, just as quickly, her eyes softened, her expression turned sweet and innocent, and a bright smile spread across her face. Ethan, her voice was a soft, sweet purr. A chill ran up my spine and settled in my chest, making my heart clench. She waved goodbye to the other dancers, and we started down the stairs. As we walked, She pulled a single rose from behind a potted plant, then a coffee from behind a small sculpture, then a box of pastries from behind a large vase. The dance studio was on the third floor of the Fine Arts building, and the stairwell walls were designed with little alcoves displaying student art. The way the light and shadows played off the sculptures and plants was beautiful. The first time I'd seen it, I was impressed, but after 3 years, I barely noticed it anymore. But tonight, every alcove held a new surprise. By the time we reached the last one on the ground floor, my heart was pounding, and I found myself holding my breath. I felt a ridiculous mix of shame and excitement. Me, a grown man, getting this worked up over a girl's surprises. It felt good to be the center of someone's attention. Chloe reached into the alcove and pulled out a small, red velvet box. The pleasant surprise I'd been feeling instantly evaporated and was replaced by panic. This was not okay. She was only 18, and besides, if anyone was going to propose, she opened the box. Inside was a simple, braided red string bracelet with 2 small, crimson beads. I wanted to punch myself for my ridiculous train of thought. "Happy birthday, Ethan," she said softly. Kevin, in his ongoing quest to win over Sarah, organized a group movie night to see some new romance flick. I was doomed. The thought of sitting next to Chloe in a dark theater made me feel a ridiculous combination of excited and nervous. The theater was dark, the only light coming from the flickering screen. To give each couple their space, we'd all sat far apart from each other. The theater was mostly empty, so from my seat, I could just make out Ryan and his date a few rows down to my left, and Kevin to my right. "Ethan, why are you so quiet?" she whispered. Her hand found mine and squeezed it. I snatched my hand back. "You," I started to say. Chloe just looked at me, her eyes shining in the dim light of the theater. I sucked in a breath. That innocent, vulnerable look was dangerously cute. "Ethan," she whispered, "when are you going to let me be your girlfriend?" I swallowed hard. You're great, Chloe, but you're too young. You're only 18. Suddenly, she leaned in close, a mischievous glint in her eye. Her warm breath tickled my ear. I jumped to my feet so fast that my bucket of popcorn went flying, scattering all over the floor. She tilted her head back to look up at me, her eyes shining in the gloom. There was something almost worshipful in her gaze. "Hey, down in front," someone yelled from behind us. I quickly dropped into the empty seat next to my original one and glued my eyes to the screen. Chloe had changed. She wasn't that dark, fierce little girl anymore. And I had changed too. My thoughts were no longer so innocent. "Ethan, can you lift your feet?" Her voice was right beside me. I flinched, pulling my feet back. I looked down and saw Chloe crouched on the floor, gathering the spilled popcorn into the hem of her dress. For some reason, it reminded me of that second Christmas back home, when we'd gone around the neighborhood and I'd given her all my candy and money. She had held out her shirt just like this to make a pouch, and she'd given me a rare, brilliant smile. We never got to have a third Christmas like that. The memory of her lying in that hospital bed flashed in my mind. I quietly knelt down and started helping her pick up the popcorn. Once a softie, always a softie. Chloe smiled sweetly, her eyes curving into crescents. "You're so nice, Ethan." She was quick to friend-zone me. I could play that game too. "You're nice too." When I got back to my dorm, I found the red velvet box in my bag. Tucked inside was a small note, written in elegant script. "Ethan, don't these 2 red beads look like azuki beans? They symbolize a love that's bone deep. Do you know what that means?" A flush of heat rushed to my face. I slowly opened the box. Inside, nestled on the velvet, were 2 small, crimson stud earrings. "Whatcha got there?" Ryan's voice boomed from behind me. I snapped the box shut and shoved it in my bag. Nothing. All 3 of them immediately swarmed me, trying to wrestle it away. I finally gave them the box, but not the note, and endured a long session of teasing. I could handle it. Chloe was sitting with me in one of my lectures, and I never expected her to find a love letter tucked inside my textbook. She held the thin white envelope between 2 fingers. On the front was a bright red heart with Ethan Hayes written inside. "Ethan, what is this?" Her voice was trembling and raw. Her eyes were red, filled with a desperate hope, as if she was begging me to lie but already knew the truth. She looked completely shattered. I thought this was a bit of an overreaction to a simple love letter. She looked like her world was ending. "It's a love letter," I said. "What's that?" she asked. Leo, sitting in front of us, leaned back and whispered, "That's the 9th one, from that math genius." I jabbed him with my pen. "Shut up. Did you read all of them?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, completely flat. Ryan leaned over from his seat, read them, and replied to every single one. Those 2 were such trolls, always trying to cause drama. I thought I heard her laugh, a tiny, broken sound, like someone in immense pain. I looked closer and saw that her eyes were shimmering with tears, the corners red. I felt like a complete monster. A wave of guilt so strong it made me physically shake washed over me. I had to explain. But just then, Chloe stood up and walked right out the side door of the lecture hall. The professor at the front even joked, "Oh, is our little mascot not staying for the whole class today?" I was shocked. Even the professor knew who she was. Chloe politely replied, "I'm sorry, professor. Something's come up and I have to leave." "Oh, no problem, dear, you go ahead." What was with this warm, paternal attitude from my professor? For the next few days, Chloe didn't contact me at all. It seemed she'd finally given up. And now that she wasn't constantly around, I found that I kind of missed it, felt like something was missing. Kevin said I was a masochist. Ryan and Leo just called me a jerk. They told me to go find Chloe, saying they'd already talked to her roommate and cleared up the misunderstanding. I didn't go. On the night of the fall festival performance, for some reason I can't explain, I put on the red bracelet she'd given me. I knew there was no way she'd be able to see it from the stage, not in a crowd that big. I was definitely losing my mind. When I saw her on stage in a crop top and shorts, shining under the lights, and heard all the guys around me whistling and cheering, I was consumed by a jealous rage. I snuck backstage, and when she came off stage, I threw my jacket over her head and pushed her into an empty dressing room. "Ethan, you should probably go change," she said, pointing to my now revealed bracelet. Couldn't stay long. The stage manager kicked me out. I sent her a text, "Going to get you a coffee. Wait for me." When I got back with her coffee, she was talking and laughing with some guy. I knew instantly who he was. The male lead. The book described him as gentle and kind, like the spring sun, warming everyone around him without being overbearing. After the break, our advisor announced a few spots for a year-long exchange program at Georgetown University. I held the application form, hesitating. Then I smacked myself hard across the face. Twice. What was I hesitating for? What fantasy was I clinging to? The male lead was here. The story was back on track. I was at the library trying to study when someone sat down across from me. It was Chloe. "Ethan," she said. The way she said my name was completely different. Before, it was light and airy, full of innocent affection. This time, it sounded like she was grinding the word between her teeth, her tone low and menacing, as if I were her mortal enemy. Her eyes were cold, but her smile was radiant. "You're so popular, Ethan. Didn't you miss me at all these last few days?" I looked at her and felt a genuine flicker of fear. The sheep's clothing was off, and the wolf was baring its teeth. So the act was over? "No," I said. She slowly stood up, reached across the table, and grabbed my chin. Every hair on my body stood on end. I was terrified. "I heard you like sweet, obedient girls," she purred, leaning so close I could feel her breath on my cheek. "Tell me, Ethan, haven't I been good enough for you? Why don't you like me?" You've been very good," I stammered, grabbing her wrist. "Just let me go." With her other hand, she took my earlobe between her fingers and began to gently rub it. My entire body went numb. I couldn't just shove her away in the middle of the library. She was grinning, her eyes locked on mine. "A debt for a meal should be repaid in full. Why don't you let me repay you, Ethan?" Her voice dropped on the last word, laced with a terrifying anger. I was so shocked I thought my head would explode. So she'd known who I was this whole time? Was this all just a game to her? "Listen, kiddo," I said, trying to sound firm. "I don't like being played with. I'm letting you off the hook this time." "Oh, thank you for sparing me, Ethan," she cooed. "I'll just have to repay you with my body then." I needed to get out of there. On the last day, I submitted my application. Then I packed my bags and left for Georgetown a week early. They say in the old days it was hard to see someone because of the distance. Nowadays, if you want to murder someone, it doesn't matter if one of you is in DC and the other is in Colorado. You could make an enemy in the morning and be at their funeral by afternoon. I slowly pulled my foot back from the next step. Chloe was standing at the bottom of the library steps, smiling up at me. I sighed. It was time we had a real talk. We went to a coffee shop. She held my hand sweetly the whole way, smiling like an angel. "Long time no see, Ethan," she said. "Long time no see," I replied, just as politely. "Ethan, I climbed so high. Did you see me?" Chloe's eyes were bright, her gaze cool and clear like spring water. I didn't answer. "Why didn't you come looking for me?" she asked. I countered. "Why would I?" For the first time, her calm facade cracked, like thin ice, revealing the darkness and obsession churning underneath. "Ethan, it's been 10 years. Did you ever think about me?" When you don't want to answer a question, you can always ask one back. "Do you hate me?" I asked. "Why did you lie to me?" she shot back. "Was it fun? Watching me make a fool of myself for you?" Chloe stared at me, her eyes boring into mine as if she were trying to read my soul. The gentle light in them was gone, replaced by a sharp, predatory glint I'd never seen in a girl's eyes before. But then she smiled, her lips parting to reveal perfect white teeth that suddenly looked menacing, like she was about to bite me. Ethan, I skipped 2 grades in high school to get to Georgetown, but you weren't there. So I took a gap year and applied to CU Boulder. That was a lot to process. The most shocking part was, how did she know I was supposed to go to Georgetown? In the original novel, Ethan did go there. I've been chasing you for so long, Ethan, she said. It's been exhausting. Was she using the chase in Chase After, or the chase in Hunt Down? I watched her warily. What do you want from me? Nothing, she said with an easy smile. I just want to repay you for feeding me all those years ago. I let out a bitter laugh. Repay me? By pretending to be some innocent little girl and playing me for a fool? I don't see any gratitude here. All I see is revenge. Ethan, don't call me that. I'm not your big brother, and I don't want to be. Her expression instantly darkened. Nothing about her face changed, but the temperature around her seemed to drop 20 degrees. Her gaze was bone-chilling. You should go. I'm going back to my dorm. But Chloe didn't leave. She just sat on the curb outside the main gate. As long as I stayed inside, she stayed outside. It started to snow, thick, heavy flakes, and the sky grew dark and cold. I even saw someone post on Facebook about the devoted girl waiting in the snow. I cursed myself. My soft heart was a terminal illness. I grabbed my coat and rushed to the gate. Chloe. She looked up, almost completely covered in snow. Her face was bright red. Her lips were turning blue, but she gave me a triumphant smile. I knew you'd come, she said. My compassionate hero wouldn't just leave me here. The moment I got close, she tried to stand and immediately collapsed into my arms. Are you okay? Dizzy, she mumbled. I'm taking you to the hospital. No. I quickly booked a hotel room online and got a cab. The moment the warm air of the room hit us, Chloe's face turned an even more alarming shade of red. I touched her forehead. She was burning up. You have a fever. I'm taking you to the hospital. No, she said. You'll leave me there. I sighed in frustration. Fine. You take a hot shower. I'll go get you some medicine. She suddenly grabbed my hand. Ethan, she said, her voice thick and congested. Can I still call you that? She looked at me with such vulnerability. I gave a weak nod. I took off my coat and then helped her with her shoes. They were soaked and nearly frozen solid. Her socks and the cuffs of her jeans were drenched. Her feet were deathly cold and pale, so cold they hurt my hands to touch. This was bad. You couldn't put frozen feet directly into hot water. It would cause chilblains. I knelt on the floor and started rubbing her feet, cursing myself the entire time for being a terminal case of compassion. I rubbed her ankles, her toes, the soles of her feet, until they were finally pink and warm. Okay, you can go shower now. I'm going. I don't know when she sat up, but she suddenly lunged at me, cupped my face in her hands, and started kissing me desperately. I was so stunned it took me a second to react. I finally came to my senses, rolled over, and pinned her wrists to the bed. She stared right into my eyes. Ethan Hayes, I'm in love with you. I was completely flustered. I scrambled off the bed. I'm going to get your medicine. She grabbed my sleeve. You'll come back. In her eyes, for a second, I saw the little girl from all those years ago, cold, desperate, and willing to drag the whole world down with her. I will, I promised. She slowly released my sleeve, a cold smile playing on her lips. You'd better. She was sitting on the floor when I left. When I came back with the medicine, she was still sitting in the exact same spot. I rushed over to help her up. I counted to 1,571, she said, her eyes fixed on me. Ethan Hayes, if you ever abandon me again, I will lose my mind. Running away wasn't an option anymore. I thought about my relationship with Chloe. If what I felt for her as a kid was just pity, seeing her as a little sister to look after, then that feeling had started to change the moment I saw her on stage at Convocation. I didn't want to admit I was that shallow, but all the pity, the weakness, the anger, the jealousy, it all pointed to one thing. Just like the original Ethan in the novel, I had fallen for her. And if that was the case, why not give it a real shot? Epilogue, Chloe's story. My reincarnation timing was terrible. I had just been kicked to the floor by my father. He was angry because he'd woken up hungover and there was no hot water. My knee was scraped raw, and my forehead had slammed against the wall. After a moment of dizziness, I realized I was back in my childhood body. Couldn't believe it. A second ago, I had been enjoying the sight of him kneeling before me, begging for mercy. Now, following some half-formed memory, I found myself wandering aimlessly, confused as to why I was standing outside Ethan Hayes' house. That's when I saw the candy. His eyes were full of pity and concern. It was startling. The candy was wrapped in clear green plastic. I'd found one just like it once, but an older boy had accused me of stealing it and beaten me bloody. When I got home, my father had beaten me half to death for it. But this Ethan, he wasn't the Ethan I remembered. I held the candy in my hand, trying to reconcile this with my memories, where the original Ethan was the source of most of my childhood misery. He was the one who bullied me, who turned the other kids against me, who framed me for things I didn't do. But now, thinking back, everything seemed to have changed right after the moment I hit him with that rock. He carefully picked up the fallen cupcake, broke off the dirty part, and set the rest on the wall for me. That was the cupcake I had craved so much in my past life but had never gotten to taste. In my first life, Ethan had ground it into the mud with his heel, refusing to even let me eat the scraps. As an adult, no matter how many fancy cakes I bought, nothing could fill that void. After 2 lifetimes, I finally got to eat it. It was the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. If only I had been reborn a few minutes earlier, I could have had the whole thing, frosting and all. He started leaving me food, even if it was just leftovers. I could never bring myself to eat that first piece of candy he gave me. I put it in an empty pill bottle and carried it with me everywhere. I kept it long after it went stale and moldy. It was my secret treasure. My candy. Ethan was so good to me. He gave me food, taught me how to garden, tutored me. I was a devious child. I failed my tests on purpose so he would have to teach me. I would answer questions wrong just to spend more time with him. I loved watching him get frustrated and worried about me. So angry he would sometimes give me a light swat. It was nothing like my father's beatings. My father hit me with disgust and hatred just to vent his rage. Ethan's frustration came from a place of caring. It was disappointment, it was worry, it was wanting me to be better. For as long as I could remember, no one had ever cared about me. It didn't matter if I lived or died, but Ethan cared. I was someone worth caring about. That's why I didn't let the teacher read my essay aloud. If she did, everyone would know how wonderful Ethan was, and they would try to steal him from me. He brought me toys and new shoes when he came back from Denver. He took me with him to visit the neighbors for Christmas. I wouldn't even let his own cousin call him Big Brother. He was my Ethan and mine alone, but I never got to wear my new shoes. I had put them by my bed, ready to wear on Christmas morning. When I woke up, my father had thrown them in the furnace. All that was left was the acrid smell of burnt rubber and a pile of black ash. I couldn't bring myself to tell Ethan. I was afraid of disappointing him. My mother was a college student who had been tricked and brought here. She had wanted to stay for me, but my father beat her until she finally ran away. My father was jealous of every man who had a son. He wanted all the boys in our town dead. He told me to lure Ethan to our house so he could bury him alive. I hit him with a brick. This time I didn't run. I wanted to kill him and be done with it, but I was too small, too weak. He overpowered me and hung me from the rafters. I kicked and screamed, cursing him with every foul word I knew. I counted to 4,372. Right before I blacked out, I saw Ethan. He was wearing Spider-Man pajamas, and his face was a mask of fury and panic. He covered me with his own robe. It felt like Spider-Man himself had come to save me. They say you have many unforgettable moments in your life. For me, almost all of them involved Ethan. On Christmas Eve, Ethan came to see me. He brought me new clothes, new shoes, and money. I had called his grandfather's house to warn him about my father, but also to ask Ethan to come get me. He got on the phone. He told me to get better and that he would come for me on the weekend. He never came. My mother finalized the paperwork. The weekend passed. It was Wednesday. He still hadn't come. I suddenly realized that to him, I was just a little kid. I needed to be something more. So I left. I would find him again when I was older. Whenever I missed him, I would count. Sometimes, when I couldn't stand it, I'd call his old house, but the number was disconnected. I raced through time, skipping grades to get to Georgetown early, but he wasn't there. I even forced myself to go to my father's funeral, just so I could ask the old neighbors where Ethan's family had gone. They had moved to Denver and he had gone to CU Boulder. I went back to his old house and stood by the stone wall where he used to leave me treats. I took a picture. Half sky, half mountains. People have obsessions. A cupcake you never got to eat. A piece of candy found on the ground. Person who was your salvation. The only cure is to possess them completely. Ethan Hayes, I was always going to find you.